As episode 2 of Darkness Rising opens up, Megatron has returned from deep space, and Starscream, a character who is classically known for being someone who wants to usurp Megatron and become the leader of the Decepticons for himself, chides Megatron that he doesn't return with an army, that he was gone for years and didn't come back with additional Decepticons to use to crush the Autobots and other Decepticon-esque things, and you could just tell he's looking for an opening to challenge Megatron's authority. So Megatron reveals that he did return with an army, or at least the means for creating one. He shows Starscream a purple crystal and uses the corpse of Cliffjumper to demonstrate what this crystal can do. He calls it both the blood of Unicron and Dark Energon, and infusing Cliffjumper with it brings him back as a zombie who ignores damage and attacks like a rabid animal. He's savage and powerful, perhaps more so than when he was alive, but there's no intelligence behind his actions. Megatron says that once he learns to control this substance, he can use it to create a legion of zombie transformers, an army which is entirely loyal to him, acts on his intelligence, and is incredibly hard to destroy. Meanwhile, back at the Autobot base, the Autobots have finished explaining the situation to the kids. They get a brief visit from their liaison to the US government, a guy named Agent Fowler, literally just to establish the fact that he exists and that the humans are aware of the Transformers, even if they do keep them secret. There's a little bit of posturing between Fowler and Optimus Prime, whereas Fowler more or less threatens to move against the Decepticons with the US Army, an action which will lead to huge amounts of collateral damage and many casualties, and Optimus has to reassure him that they have the situation under control, and you kind of get the feeling they've done this several times before. It's a dance that they have to dance occasionally, more for show than anything else. It's about this time, though, that because Cliffjumper was brought back online by Dark Energon, they are able to detect his life signals again. RC, being the closest to Cliffjumper, insists that they go check and see if he's alive. So they follow the signal using their ground bridge technology and stumble upon a hidden Decepticon Energon mine. They fight through this mine, basically dismantling the entire operation, and they actually manage to get to Cliffjumper just long enough to learn what's become of him, that he is now this zombified monster creature. Megatron realizes that he's not ready to face Optimus at this point, and so he has Starscream blow the entire mine, which, remember, raw Energon is very volatile. Just detonating a small explosive in this mine causes the entire thing to go up in flames. And thanks to Megatron's mistake here, thanks to him bringing Cliffjumper back online with the Dark Energon, the Autobots have actually gotten something of a leg up on the situation. If Megatron had, for example, shot one of his own guys through the chest and reanimated them, the Autobots never would have known to come to this location. They never would have gotten the opportunity to dismantle this extensive Decepticon operation. They wouldn't have learned of the Dark Energon, even if they don't know what it is yet. And they wouldn't have gotten a sample of it. Turns out, when she was interacting with Cliffjumper, RC actually got some of the Dark Energon on her. It makes her ill, and even though they're able to decontaminate her and reverse the effects, this small amount of the substance caused adverse effects in her almost immediately. So not only do they have some idea of what this stuff can do, not only do they know that it poses a risk to them, but they have a sample of it that they can study. The kids all get paired off with their Autobot partners. The idea is that they'll basically stake out the kids' houses to make sure that they're okay when they can't be with the Autobots. RC, more than the others, doesn't want to do this duty. She's still worked up about what happened to Cliffjumper. I mentioned this in the last review. She tries to be all hard-ass, but she's really not. So the moment that she sees the close relationship that Jack has with his mom, she starts to soften a little bit. And the episode ends on that, on a scene where some of the Dark Energon splashes onto a piece of machinery in the Autobot base, bringing it to life, and a scene where Megatron purposefully infects himself with Dark Energon, hoping that doing so will give him some control over it. This episode is just as excellent as the last one. It is obviously set up, it's obviously building up to something. You can almost see it laying the groundwork for future plot lines. The Dark Energon, for example, it's name-dropped that it has some connection with Unicron, but we don't get any clarification as to how it's connected with Unicron or even who Unicron is yet. And someone who's already a Transformers fan will at least have some idea. But just in terms of this series and this series alone, it's left as a dangling plot thread that you can't help but find intriguing if you're at all interested in the show already. We get a pretty good rundown throughout this episode of everything that the Dark Energon can do, which was pretty neat. And overall, this is just a good world-building kind of episode. The introduction to Fowler and the idea that the Autobots are in contact with the government. The idea of ground bridges and space bridges are introduced here, ground bridges being portals to other places on a single planet, and space bridges being that, but throughout the entire galaxy. We even get to see a bit of the kids interacting with the Autobots, ingratiating themselves to the Autobots. Ratchet is probably the most resistant to the kids being there, but even he starts to come around a little bit in this episode. We get to see the beginnings of some of the character dynamics that are going to be important in the series as it goes on. We even get, mostly from Megatron's perspective, which is really interesting, some of the dynamic between him and Optimus. They may hate what the other is doing right now, but neither of them hates the other. They actually quite respect each other, and that's an interesting take. Overall, this episode's goal was clearly to develop the world of the series, and it did a good job of it. I wanted to point out here, since this is the first episode where we've gotten a lot of both Optimus and Megatron, that their original voice actors, Peter Cullens and Frank Welker, did return to play the characters in the show, which really goes a long way towards helping it feel like my childhood updated, which, as I discussed in the previous review, was the point of the aligned continuity. The lack of a real conclusion does kind of hamper the episode, I guess, but it is still just part 2 of 5, so it makes sense that it wouldn't conclude anything substantial.